Hey, what's up, guys? This is a little bit of a different format. I just got a new camera, so I wanted to try it out. So you finally can see the rest of my room. It's my bed, and desk, and whatever. So I usually do system design interviews on my channel, but I figured since I recently just went through a bunch of interviews for new technical jobs, I wanted to share a little bit about the interview process for some of the companies I was at. So this is a video of 10 different software engineering jobs that I applied to and the interview processes. This will just be kind of like a list. A little bit about me. I'm a software engineer. I was a L4 at Amazon, recently getting ready for promotion. I figured I might as well look around for other jobs in the industry, maybe jump for an L5 because I'm pretty close to getting there. I've led a few projects, and yeah, let's just get into it. So first one is obviously Amazon. I can't leave them out because that's where I'm currently working. So Amazon L5, I interviewed, actually originally interviewed. Their process starts with a recruiter call followed by a phone screen, which is technical, and an on-site. For the phone screen, I was given a coding question that had two parts. They wanted me to code a very simple tree data structure. If you're not familiar, it's similar to a prefix tree. And once you finish that, then you also have, there was also a follow-up question since I had some extra time. If you're not familiar with the Amazon interview process, there's also 30 minutes of LP questions. So LP questions are their behavioral questions. They are questions such as, tell me about a time that you save money for the company, tell me about a time where you delivered a deadline with a lot of changes, or tell me a time where you had a disagreement with your with a teammate. So these questions you typically answer with a STAR format, which is situation, task, got the A, action, and result. So you can format these such as like, the situation was my teammate, we had this huge task on our team to finish this big project. My task was to do this part of the project and then give some more technical detail. The action is I did this, and the result led to like a significant improvement in whatever processes. So passing that, then you're led to the on-site, which is 4 interviews. 2 of them were technical, 1 of them was system design, and then 1 was a bar raiser. And the bar raiser could be a coding or a behavioral interview. And all of these are similar to the phone screen, where it's 30 minutes of LP questions followed by 30 minutes of coding. And the coding questions are very standard lead code. Like, for example, some questions could be like word break, or like find the number of islands in a array. So very standard lead code. The bar raiser is more of like it's like a wild card. I got a object-oriented programming question, so it's asking to create an object and then, or code an object to do something and then expand on the object as new requirements come in. So that's for Amazon. Next is for Facebook. So I did the technical phone screen, which is 1 question. Sometimes I give 2. Unfortunately, I did not make it to the on-site, but I did make it to the on-site a couple years ago when I was a new grad. So I, from memory, it was 4 to 5 rounds, 3 coding, 1 hiring manager, and then maybe a system design depending on the level you're interviewing for. I interviewed for E4, which is equivalent to Amazon's SDE2. So unfortunately I didn't make it to the on-site. I just wasn't in the right headspace that day. Next is Uber. So Uber has a longer interview process. It is 3 rounds, 1 starting with the recruiter screen and code signal, So they use a online tool called Code Signal, which asks you a technical question. And Uber, similar to other like hedge funds or like HFT firms, they all use Code Signal, but Uber is different in that they give you a minimum score to pass. And after the Code Signal, you'll get a score between 0 and I think 850 or 750. I believe it's 850. And you need a minimum score, depending on team, of like around 650 to 675 to pass. Sometimes it's 625. You can ask your recruiter, they'll give you the exact numbers. If you get high enough, you'll go directly to an on-site. Otherwise, you'll have to do a phone screen. The Code Signal is around 4 questions. It's actually more on the difficult side for how short the time is. But once you finish that, you'll like hear back from the recruiter like within like 2 to 3 days, and then the next is a technical phone screen. So the technical phone screen is 60 minutes standard leak code problems. So if you pass that, then you go to the on-site, which is 8 sections but 4 interviews. So you have 2 coding sections, 1 system design, and then 1 behavioral management, hiring manager. So the coding questions, 1 is a standard coding question. The next is a bar raiser coding, which can be very, very wide spectrum. The system design, one part focuses on something that you've done before, and then another part is creating something new. So the system design, there's a bunch of resources such as like Rocking System Design Interview, and my videos in the tab below. They also cover some system design questions. The hiring manager is standard behavioral questions, like tell me about a time that you improved the team's processes or improved the overall processes of the team. So if you studied for any other behavioral interview, you should be able to answer those pretty well. Next, let's go to Paxos. So Paxos is a startup. I interviewed there because I was interested in crypto. I got an offer. Unfortunately, I turned it down because of numbers. I feel like they are a cool company and definitely really interested in potentially looking for opportunities there in the future. But they had 3 rounds similar to Uber. 1 was a recruiter screen. Passing that, you get a phone screen, which they ask like a very standard leak code question. It was a little bit different because the domain was a little bit different. They're in the financial services space, so because of that, the questions were more on like the trading front or like grouping orders and like making an online brokerage kind of thing. Stuff you might need on like an online brokerage. And then on the on-site, they had 3 rounds. 1 was a coding, 1 was a system design, and 1 was a behavioral. So the coding was pretty standard object oriented. They wanted something that was similar to processing data. And then the second one was a system design, was designing a new system with multiple parts. And then the last one was a behavioral question. So after that, more in the financial services space, I interviewed with 2 Sigma. So 2 Sigma, unfortunately I didn't make it to the on-site, but they had 3 parts. 1 was a recruiter screen / hacker rank. Second one was a phone screen. And then third, if I made it, was an on-site. So the recruiter call was very standard. It's just like a filtering call. After that, you get a hacker rank with 2 questions, and this changes depending on like the time. And you have a set amount of time to do it. After that, if you pass the phone screen, you'll hear back for if you pass the hacker rank, you'll hear back for a phone screen, and the phone screen is with an engineer. There's a couple multiple choice questions followed by a coding question, very standard leak code. But it was very different than other coding questions since it did require a little bit of out-the-box thinking, so it's not something you typically do day to day in like a very big tech company, but it is very doable. It's not very hard. I definitely messed up because I was like high nerve that day. I was getting really ready for that interview, and I must have just, I don't know, I hit something that ended up like causing me to freeze up and not being able to write anything. I mean, it's always next time. And then after that, if you pass that again, on-site. And from my research, I think the on-site's around 4 interviews, 4 to 5. After that, of course, we can't talk about big tech without talking about Google. So Google is 5 different interviews. You have the phone screen, the on-site, the hiring committee, the team match, and then potentially the offer. So the phone screen is purely technical. You have a coding round, and if you pass that, you'll hear back and go for an on-site. On-site is 5 interviews, so you have the behavioral, you have the 3 coding, and then you have a potentially system design, depending on your level. I interviewed for L4, so I didn't get the system design. I had 4 coding questions instead. But they get progressively harder over time, and a lot of the questions I've never really seen before on LeetCode. They definitely ask like questions that are like a little bit out of the box that are modifications on existing LeetCode problems. So definitely recommend studying CS fundamentals for this one, because if you do pass the onsite, or if you do get a question and you finish it under time, you might get drilled into like understanding the basics of like exactly what is happening in the code. For example, like if you have extra time and you use like something like a heap, you need to understand like what is the insertion time for a heap, and like what happens when you retrieve max element or min element. Also, like if, for example, if like you finish with a little bit extra time and you use a dictionary in your implementation, a very valid question is like, what can you do here to use a different data structure? Like, are there any other data structures and can you code it? So those kinds of questions are also something that's very valid for Google. So they definitely require a little bit more in-depth CS knowledge compared to other companies such as Amazon, Facebook. Personally, I think that was like a refreshing change, because it seems like they really want you to understand at every point, like exactly what is the runtime and like exactly like what kind of complexity does this operation take. If you do get a good enough score on the onsite, then you go for hiring committee. And then hiring committee is a process where you get presented to senior engineers, and senior engineers eventually come to a consensus whether to accept, hold, or reject you. So if you get accepted, then you move on to team match. If you get held, there is a chance that you have to do more interviews. Otherwise, you might have to submit a statement of support. There's some weird misconsensus in the data that requires more interviews or more trials. So that will probably be handled by your recruiter, based on my knowledge. And then if you get rejected, then you have to wait a year before you try again. If you do make it past hiring committee, then you're on team match, where you get put up for multiple teams and you just wait until a team picks you and you match with the team. This is the part I'm currently on, so I'm just waiting, like fingers crossed. If you do get matched with a team, then you get potentially an offer, and then the offer is to join that team, and then if you accept the offer, then you're in Google, based on my knowledge. So that's definitely the longest one. Google's interview process takes forever. I know some of my friends have been stuck on team match for multiple months. I think I've looked online, it's unheard of for somebody to pass an interview in under a month. Definitely allocate some time for Google, because they are very picky with who they take, and also it's a very, very, very long process, and you can get rejected at any point. So it is pretty long, but hopefully there's a light at the end of the tunnel. After that, I also interviewed with ClearStreet, which is another company. Their interview process is constantly changing, so based on like what I had, it's very standard. However, their questions are more on the thinking side and the logic side, which is a refreshing change, even for a software engineer. So there's 3 steps. You have the recruiter screen, the phone screen, and then the onsite. The phone screen was talking with the senior engineer, just learning about interest to find the right team for you to interview for with a simple mind thinking problem. After that, if you pass that, you get the on-site, which is 3 rounds, coding, distributed systems, and hiring manager. So coding is more of like a on-the-job type question. So you won't get anything that might be on LeetCode, but you will get something that was done on the job, and then you have to solve a very simplified version of it. The distributed system question is more about drilling in and understanding what your knowledge of distributed systems is, what you know, what you don't know, and then getting a simple question to like understand, can you debug this issue with a distributed system? And the hiring manager is very simple, behavioral. It's like, can you tell me a time? Can you share an example and use the STAR method that I mentioned before? So last two, one is Peak 6 and one is TikTok. I'll go over Peak 6 first. So Peak 6 was a hedge fund, is a hedge fund in New York, and also a lot of different areas. They have a 5-step or 4-step recruiting process. One is obviously the recruiter screen, next is a HackerRank take-home, then a phone screen, and onsite. So their HackerRank is, if you pass the recruiter screen, then their HackerRank is 2 questions. Depending on like which role you apply to, I'm sure they have different tests. Mine was around like 90 to 120 minutes, very doable. If you pass the HackerRank, you'll go to a phone screen where it is working with an engineer to understand your depth of knowledge and like getting some behavioral, asking some behavioral questions. It probably depends depending on like which role you apply to. Luckily, I didn't have that much coding on mine. And then lastly, you have an onsite where you get matched with maybe 1 or 2 teams. And the onsite is 3 sections. You have a coding section, which was a very open-ended coding question, where it was more of like, here is a real-life environment, and here's a problem we have to solve. Can you solve it? And you're free to use like any resources on the internet, which is very cool, I think. After that is after that there was a system design question, which unfortunately I didn't get to. I was called early, and they unfortunately ended the interview a little bit early. And then I did one hiring manager interview where it was mostly behavioral questions. Cool company. They are based in New York and Chicago. And then lastly, TikTok. So TikTok was a little bit different. They had 4 rounds, and they don't have an onsite. So the only way to move to the next round is by passing the previous round, and their phone screens are structured as a distributed onsite or async onsite. So first one's a recruiter call to gauge interest, and then their phone screens, each one is around, the first one I had was 2 questions. So very similar to Facebook, they asked 2 LeetCode style questions. The first one was related to intervals, and the second one was related to linked lists. And then if you pass, then you go to the next one, which is assuming another phone screen. Unfortunately, I didn't pass the first round, so I ended the interview a little bit early. So those are my 10 interview experiences recently. They are all in like software engineering. Definitely like take away from this, study LeetCode. Every interview process is different, but there are some overarching themes. Like if you study LeetCode, if you study system design, and if you write down all your experiences before you enter the interview process, like create a list of everything you've done at your current job and previous job so you can reference them easily. That will definitely make your interview process a lot easier and a lot, it takes off a lot of stress from takes a lot of stress from being on the spot. I think for me, the hardest parts are definitely the system design and the behavioral on the spot. The coding is relatively easy because once you pick up the pattern, there is like a very like set pattern to like how to do these. And also, since like if you have any interest in like competitive programming, a lot of the questions are similar to that, like a very, very, very distilled version of a big problem, and then you can go in and find out the right data structures, find out the right algorithm, and just code it. It's very, very fun. I think it's also very like, algorithmic to do it. If you're interested in that, drop a comment off below, and I can maybe focus more on doing more lead code problems to sort of show you my process. System design is really fun. It's definitely like a fun type of interview, and there's definitely like a big wide range of what you could do with it. And then of course behavioral is just having good experiences and knowing when to bring them up. So if you like that video, like and subscribe below for more videos about tech and getting into the tech industry as a software engineer. Comment below on like what other videos you might want, whether it be system design, coding, or these sort of like shared experiences posts or videos. I'll be sure to like upload more and respond to any comments that you might have, or any feedback or suggestions. Just drop it down below. So thanks for watching, and peace guys.